Today, the first wind coefficient that we need to discuss is the exposure category. So, first, before we go to wind load, we need to discuss some coefficients, factors, or anything that would contribute to our wind load. No? So the very first wind coefficient that we need to discuss is the exposure category. So what is this exposure category? So exposure category is divided in three categories. That is exposure category B, category C, and category D. So category B is just something that obstructed, no? If you construct a building in a exposure category B location, it means that the wind is obstructed, meaning that when you have wind loading on that particular building, it would be much lesser compared to category C or category D. So this is simplified by both ASCE 7-16 and NSCP 2015, in which NSCP 2015, the basis of which is the ASCE 7. Okay, so this is from figure C 26.7-1 in commentary, no? In chapter 26 of the commentary, this is a simple representation of what is exposure category B. So, exposure category B is something that the upwind, no, that the roughness in the upwind of the building or structure is immediately roughness B. So, if you have a roughness B that is immediately upwind of the building, uh, the exposure category is B. So what is this roughness B? So roughness B is just the urban or suburban areas, wooded areas, or other terrain. So it means that um, this is not open. So it is obstructed, and because of that obstruction, wind will be much lesser. No? So the force on your structure will be much lesser. So category B is the exposure in which the wind, no? The wind does not really give so much loading to your structure. So the next category we should discuss, but before that, in order for this one to be considered as category B, the D1, or as you can see here, the D1, or the distance between the building or structure before the any roughness, in which any roughness, the distance between the any roughness and the building structure, in which in the middle of it is roughness B, should be greater than what do you call this, 1,500 feet for H, that is less than 30 feet. And for the height of a building, if your building, let's say, is greater than 30 feet, no, uh, the surface roughness or the distance of roughness B should be greater than 2,600 feet or 20 H. So whichever of them is higher. So if it's not, if D1 is lesser than both of these, then it cannot be considered exposure category B. So you may know this, that your design is within exposure category B if you satisfy these inequalities, no? So make sure before you consider exposure category B, just make sure that between the any roughness surface and your building, there is a roughness B. So this roughness B is defined, no? Is defined by having urban or suburban areas or any wooded areas, or terrains with numerous closely spaced obstructions like houses, buildings, or vegetations like trees. No, if those if those obstructions is greater than 1,500 feet or greater than 2,600 feet for these inequalities, or for these yes, for these inequalities, you may consider, no? You can consider your exposure category as B. So what if it does not fit, or what if it does not follow this one? So There are other categories like category C and category D. But first, let's go to category D. So in category D, we have two cases. So the first case is for this roughness. So as you can see here, uh, the representation created by ASC is just there is no obstruction. So exposure category B is something like open or unobstructed. No, so that is if I can define category D in one word, that is for meaning niya is open or unobstructed. So what is this roughness D? So roughness D is anything that is flat, unobstructed, or anything that is near water surfaces. So, for example, if you are in coastal areas, in near shores, meaning the wind there is very much higher compared to category B. So, category D is the category that has the highest wind load. So, always remember that, no? If you consider exposure category D, you will have the highest wind load. And if you consider exposure category B, you have the lowest wind loading. Because exposure category D, in the case 1, this one, if the D1 or the roughness is or the distance between any roughness before the building or other structure, meaning uh, the building structure is immediately upwind of the surface roughness D for 5,000 feet or greater or 20 h, then meaning you will have exposure category D. So don't consider exposure category B, B as in a boy. Do not consider it if this is your roughness or if this is the situation. So if you are near if you are near coastline or shores or near the sea, you should consider this one, category D or category dog. No, this is for case 1. For case 2, it's just that there is still roughness D, and before the roughness D and the building, there is some roughness or other roughness B or C. For this one, greater than 600 feet, it's still considered as category D. So what is category C? So category C is open terrain and category B is urban. So category D is flat, no? So this is just what you will need to remember. Just consider category D if you are near C or if you have something that looks like this case 2, no? If you have something like this case 2. So you know what is the difference between exposure category boy and exposure category dog or D. Then what is exposure category C? So exposure category C is anything that is not both B or D. So if you are not really sure of what is your category, consider category C. But if you are sure that it is B or boy, like for example, you are constructing your building in a location with many buildings or with many obstructions like small houses, trees, consider that the wind there does not really give so much force or does not have high loads or high wind load. So consider exposure category B or boy. But if you construct your structure or building in, let's say, coastline or shorelines, consider the exposure category D because wind there is much higher or the loading of the wind there has the highest load because there is no obstruction. So if you cannot consider both B and if you cannot consider both D, consider exposure category C. So this is just the example, no, of category C and D, category B, C, and D. So for clarification, let's try to see some examples uh, from the ASCE 7-16. No? So, for example, this one. So, as you can see in this terrain or surface, you may see, you can see that there are small houses, there's small vegetation. So, consider your exposure category as B or boy. Like for example here, you also consider it as exposure category boy, B, no? So what if also this one, If you are constructing your building here, consider exposure B. So consider exposure B. Okay, here exposure B2. So near the urban areas. So if it is if it is obstructed or there are many obstructions, consider exposure B. So this is not very hard, no? So for flat open grassland like this one, say you don't have anything that is open, but there is still flat and open grassland, no? There's little obstruction, or the obstructions is not typically uh, or the obstructions are scattered. Consider exposure C. Consider exposure C. So this one also, the obstructions are scattered. So if you are confused if this is B or if this is C, consider that this is C because the obstructions are scattered here now. So consider exposure C. So if you are constructing it in an area like this, assume that this area is, as you can see here, it's scattered obstruction. Use exposure C, because it's much better to have a conservative loading than loading that is lower than your expected, no? So for category D, as you can see this one, there is a sea, or there is a shoreline or coast, or your building or your structure is near the coastline or shore. This is really an open. So expect that winds are very strong here, and therefore if it is very strong, expect that you should design your structure for higher wind loads. So this is exposure D. So this is very easy, and I think that's it. No? You can find this one in the manual in ASCE 7-16 manual standards. No? So these are the examples of exposure categories. So thank you.